All right, welcome to another tutorial, another common door where you can be able to open, press E, and close. To jump right in, the first thing that we want to do is to set up our door. You can do this with really any door. We want to have a parent object, and this is literally just to be able to place my door in the scene. This is just controlling the location and anything that might be with the door. Inside the door, we have like the door frame, we have the door left and the door right, and I've got a few other things in our scene that you can just ignore for right now. But the main thing is having that door parent and having like, say, like door left and right, or maybe you only have one door, that's fine as well. So on our door parent, or in this case, what I've got called door structure, I'm gonna add in a box collider and do is trigger. And then we'll go ahead and bring this up. And this is gonna be what we're using for the player to activate the text. Next thing that we need is we'll create a script and we'll name this door key press. And then we're gonna place this on our parent object. Now, before we write the script, we're gonna have some animations that we want to call in our script. So let's go ahead and set up the animations really quickly. If you've already done something like this, you could skip to the end of the animation. Make sure you check to see how the animator is set up, and then go ahead and write the script and apply it to yours. So for this one, we're going to select our door structure, and we can go ahead and let's go to the animation tab here, and we can just go ahead and say create. I think the first one I'm going to do is just a waiting, and if we go back to our project, it did create this door structure animator controller. You can rename this if you want, like door controller or something like that. That's totally fine. It'll automatically update on the object as well. So our waiting animation really is just going to be where it is closed, and we're going to use, say, maybe 12 frames in 1 second. That's fine. We're going to create a new clip, and we'll call this opening. And then now to actually animate this, we're going to take the shortcut, and we're going to click record, and we're going to select our door left here. And I noticed that the position is -2. I think I can just go forward in time. Ooh, we need to set this to 12. And we'll just bring this open. So it automatically created the first keyframe where it was -2. And then right here, because I clicked at the 1 second mark, it created the keyframe that I just dragged it out. So then I can zoom in just to show you again. We're going to do door right. Right records on. All I need to be is at the 1 second mark. And I can also do this in the scene view, just drag this over. So I have two child objects that I'm animating their position, and it automatically put those in there. And now we have open. Bam. Looks really nice. Now, we could do the same thing for closing, but actually we could take a little shortcut here. So when we start, our door is in the waiting, like idle position. We're going to turn off record now. And this opening here, we want to actually duplicate this, so we can copy and paste it. And then we get opening 0. Now we're actually going to name this closing, and it's using the opening animation clip, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to put this as -1. So it's going to go the opposite direction, essentially, with the negative, but the same speed because it's 1. So we'll be able to utilize that to our advantage. So then for waiting, we're going to right click, make transition to opening. Now in order to transition, we actually need to create something in our animator a parameter that we can access with the code. So we're going to click the plus, and we're going to do a trigger. Really simple, where you just trigger it, and it generally resets on its own, but there is also a way in the code to just reset the trigger as well. For this one, we're just going to call open, and we'll create another trigger called close. And then what we can do is click on our transition, and going from waiting to opening, the condition is we must call open. And we do not want there to be an exit time. We're exiting only based on this condition and to exit immediately. So we'll just turn this off. And then opening, we're going to right click, make transition to closing. And then this one, the condition has to be that we are telling the parameter to close. We're setting that trigger to close. It'll then automatically go to closing. And then closing, oh, we almost forgot, turn has exit time off. Then closing, we want to go back to waiting. So we'll right click, make transition, boop. Now for this one, if we click on the transition, we do want to have an exit time, because when the door closes, we want it to automatically go to this state, even though it's the same frame, right? Like, because waiting it's shut, but we have to have it transition states to kind of go full cycle. Now we could reduce our exit time to even 0.5, so we could reduce the time here to make it faster, but that should be pretty good, hopefully. So we have that. Now that's our animator setup. Now we need to go back to our clips, because our opening clip, if we select it, this is kind of like a video file, that it's looping. Well, the door, we don't want it to open, 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 and just keep repeating. So we want the loop off. So once it opens, it stops, and it stays on the last frame. Then it'll go to close, and it'll stop and stay on the last frame. So waiting can be looping. There's not really even anything in there, unless if we have to do something, but that's fine. We'll leave it there. That should be good to go. And then now we need to set up our canvas here to be able to see text. So what we want to do is we can simply right click, and we're going to do a UI. Let's do Text Mesh Pro. Import that in. And then on our canvas, here's the kicker with this. This canvas, we don't want to be overlaid on the screen. We actually want this to be in the world. We want it to be right here in front of the door. So we're going to do world space. And with that, we don't need the canvas scaler, because it's going to be in the world, so we can remove that. And we don't need the raycaster, so we can remove that as well, because this text is just going to be for display purposes. Okay. So next up, we could change these settings here. So we could do, let's maybe zero these out. We'll do the width of 2 and height of 2. And you'll just have to find it and move it into place. Now our text is going to be massive, but the canvas itself, if I bring this up to the door, is actually this 2 by 2 right here. So we can go ahead and select our text. And we really just want it to fit our canvas. And we could try to mess with some numbers here, but the easiest way would be to select the gizmo here. And you can see we can do Shift, sets the pivot, and Alt also sets the position. Well, we can kind of do both. So we could do Shift and Alt, and we're just going to do Stretch. And what this is going to do is it's going to stretch the text to the parent object, which is the canvas. So we click that, boom. There it is. Now, our text, we'll center this, and then our font is going to be way too big, and that's why it's not even showing up. If your font is too big, it will not even show up. So we could start by doing 0.1, and then you can see, voila, there it is. So maybe 0.2, that looks pretty good. Woohoo! And maybe instead of rotating the text, I'll just rotate the whole canvas. Oh, whoopsie. So Control Z if you did the same thing, but I just went back, rotated the canvas. We move this into place. It looks good until you move in 3D and then you're like, nope. Maybe like right there. Yeah. I'm going to make this a bold font size, and maybe I'll make this one 0.3. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Whoop, whoop. All right, and you can see, even though I put a space here, if I don't have a paragraph start, even with just this one space, you can see because my box is just the right size. So if you wanted a smaller font, you can see it's, when we write this in our code, it's not going to translate correctly. So what you could do is essentially just bring your box over your border here to make it fit so that it'll make it be 2 lines. So now it'll say to open, press E. There you go. Okay, so we got that. So now I got our basic text. Now this is just a template just to see what it looks like. Because in code, we're going to control what it says. So I may just put press key for right now so you can see. And then I might call this the interact text. And then there's our canvas door text. There we go. And then what we can do is just drag this in to parent it to the door structure, because anywhere I move this door, I want it to have this as well. Now, I already made a prefab. Otherwise, you could drag your door into your prefabs folder. But in this case, since I already have a prefab, I'm going to go ahead and just do overrides and apply my overrides. So that way my door is saved and updated as a prefab. Lovely. And before we go any further, we want to play test to make sure this is okay. So we'll just click play, and then we go to our animator here, and you can see it's in the waiting. You have to make sure you select your door. If you click off, if you have anything else with an animator, it's going to select the other object with an animator. So I've got my door structure selected. We can see we're waiting. I click open, it opens. Click close, it closes. All right. So now we're ready to write our script. So we can go ahead and double click that script. We get it opening in Visual Studio or whatever other compiler you may use. And we could just go ahead and remove these for a second. Now, a couple things that we need. We're going to be accessing that text, which is Text Mesh Pro. So we need to add in the namespace. That's going to have the pre-written code for Text Mesh Pro that we can access and use. And then we're going to need several variables. And this would be needed if your door had the animator on it. It was a separate object. So kind of like my original door video, you could go back and check that out. We have 2 Booleans. We have one for is player in range, because we want to only be able to press E and it do something for the door when you're in range. And then we also need to know if the door is open or is it closed, so that we can have different text for when it's open and when it's closed. Next, we have our interact text, right? Because we need the actual text. And from that, we're going to tell it what text to say, depending on if the door is open or closed. We also need this variable to store the animator. So right now it's empty. It's an empty container, but we will write code to attach the animator to that. And then, of course, an audio source. That would be our speaker to play audio. And we'll also need an audio clip for the door sound. Now, for right now, I'm going to go ahead and comment this out until I actually get my door sound, have it downloaded. We'll write the code for that so you have it in there. And once you have an audio file, you can easily uncomment this and then assign it in the inspector. So we'll save this, and then back in our scene, you'll see here Now we have our door key press. We can go to our door canvas and then our text and drag this in to the text. And then for the door, actually, we're not going to be doing it this way, so we're not going to need that for this one. So we can go ahead and just remove that. That would be useful if the animator, if you had multiple objects and the animator was on a different child object, that would be another way that we could do that. But we won't need to this time. So awake runs before start, and so we want it to go ahead and grab our text, and we're going to use a method called setText. And this comes from TextMesh Pro, and that will allow us to set the text. And it's very similar to like print or debug.log, because we're setting the text, and what is that? It's a string. So we have parentheses and then quotations, and that would be our string inside there. So in this case, I don't want it to say anything, because on awake, when we're loading the game, we don't want the text to say anything. The door is closed, there's nothing to say, because first the player needs to be able to walk up to the door first. Next, we'll have our start function. And this is where, of course, we can get our anim. If it was on another object, we could do like what we had before, where I had a game object and I would do door.getComponent animator. In this case, it's just going to be getComponent and then Animator. There we go. And the other thing that you could do is, if it was a child object, you could also do getComponent in children, and that would also get the animator in any child objects. So that really helps with a lot of things, depending on what kind of maybe door you modeled or what kind of door you downloaded from the asset store or from somewhere, right? That could be really useful. In this case, I'm just going to do getComponent because my animator is on the parent object that has this script. And then, of course, audio source, we basically do the same thing. Next up, we're going to do an on-trigger enter. So this is, remember, this is on the door. So the first thing that we want to do is look, is whatever has entered the trigger of the door, we want to see if it's tagged player. So if we do other.gameObject.compare tag player, let's see, with a capital P, and we'll save that. Always save your progress. Let's go back and select our player, and in fact make sure that you have assigned the player tag. You can also do add tag and add one in, but should have a default player tag that we can use. Whoops. Button fingers here. So no semicolon with an if statement, but if it is tagged player, we could print player has entered. Now this is something we would want to remove later on, but this just simply makes it really easy that when the player enters, it'll print this. And I would test that out afterwards to make sure it's good to go. And then we're going to do on trigger exit. And same kind of thing, but player has exited. So if the player is in the trigger, we want to say that the player is in range. So all we're going to really use this trigger for, and if this is running and it prints to your console, then you know this code is running, and you can essentially delete that or comment it out if everything's good to go. So what we want to do is take our variable here, player in range, and if the player entered the trigger, we'll say player in range is true. right? Versus if the player exits, then player in range is false, because we want to be able to make sure when the player's not in range and you press E, it doesn't open or close the door. That would be pretty bizarre. So now that we have our on triggers, underneath start, I'm just going to go ahead and put now a void update method. The first thing that we want to do is check if the player is in range, then we will be able to have text to either press E to open or press E to close. But if the player is not in range, then we still want the text to stay blank. Right? We've got to set the text to be blank when we load everything, but then also when the player comes in range, we're going to set the text here. But when the player's not in range, we want the text to basically kind of disappear. Now, of course, you can do other things like set active and enable and just kind of disable the text object. But this is another way of doing it where we do have the text. It's not showing any string of characters at all. So now, if the player is in range, now we want it to say to close, press E, or to open, press E. So we need to figure out if the door is open. So if is door open? Well, if the door is open, so, right, we could say door open is equal to true, right? That's what this is saying. It's a Boolean. So if the door is open is true, we want it to actually say to close, press E. And if that's confusing, you could just do the opposite statement first. So if the door is not open, right? That's what this is. Then we want to open the door. So we could set that one first. So we'll do interact text dot set text. Now this is where it gets a little weird. So if I want to say to open, press E, I can't add quotations because it thinks I want a string inside a string, and you can't do that. Now, I could just say to open, press E. That works. But otherwise, a little trick to doing this is I could put a slash here, then my quotation, and that tells it to ignore this, it tells it that this is a string letter, so it'll actually go into the text field. And then I would do the same thing again where I do the slash and quotations. So you can see how it changes purple. So now I can save that and we could play test. Why not? If I walk up to open, press E. There we go. So, because if I press E right now, I don't want to open the door. I want to make sure the player is in range, and if they're in range, then they can press E, and it opens. Of course, that part's not working yet, but we're getting there. So now we can copy this same thing, because if the door is open, we want to close it, so then we would say to close, and we could add our spacing or no spacing, however you want to do yours, and save that. Now, pretty fine to just do this as an if-else statement, but somebody might say in the comments that you can use a switch statement for this as well, a case switch, and that's fine. You could do that as well. Usually I use switch statements when you're going to have a lot of nested if statements, and then it kind of helps clean it up and make it a little bit more cleaner and optimal. Nonetheless, now we just need to add in our statement for if you press E and the player is in range, then it'll check to see if the door is open and close it. So in update, we could just do a whole separate block of code and that is, right, if we input.get key down, and the player has to be in range while pressing E for this to do anything for the door. So we need both conditions to be true. And you could test this out by just having something like printing you pressed E, but it's not totally necessary, but definitely helps if you need to test that. So then we have, if you press E, we need to first see, is the door open? If the door is open, then we need to go to our animator, which is anim, and we'll simply set the trigger to close. So that's going to go straight to our animator, and it'll click the close Boolean and close the door. Woo woo. So if the door is not open, we put our else statement here, because if it is open, that's true. Else, that's not true. We want the opposite, where we would open it. I might call this a door move sound. And then to call that, we just need to get our audio source. And audio source dot play one shot, and then the audio clip is called door move sound, in this case our variable. But this is going to give us an error because I don't have an audio file for this. So right now, I could just comment that out for right now and keep my audio clip commented out. That was what I was talking about. But I can just copy this, and it's ready to go. Once you assign audio, then we can comment this out. Now, of course, to make sure you can do that, we just use a serialized field, so that way your audio clip will show in the inspector, and you can drag it in. We save, and always play test, right? Of course, make sure I didn't miss anything. So we walk up to open, press E. Oh, no, it's not even updating correctly. To open. It still says to open. All right, I forgot one thing, and that is this Boolean doesn't ever change. So when we press E, if the door is open, it closes. We need to change the Boolean. Just like else, okay, we press E, the door's closed, but we open it. We then need to say, is door open? We need to change it to be true. So we're opening the door, we set this Boolean to be true, and then when we close the door, we need to say that is door open is false because we just closed it. So that would be the major thing that we would need to do to make sure that it's changing the Boolean, so that way it'll run these conditions. Dun, dun, dun. And then it'll update our text. So we walk up, press E, and automatically to close, press E. Sweet. All right, awesome job. And that's all it takes to get that up and working. Please like and subscribe. Hope to see you in the next video.